My name is Luis Alonso. I am research scientist at the City Science Group, MIT Media Lab, and my topic is, the City Science Group has this collaborative network of cities where different cities or regions in the planet, they are working with us in order to figure out how human dynamics are impacting in cities, in urban ecosystems. So Gipuzkoa, for instance, is one of that living labs, but we had a first lab that was Andorra, kind of 10 years ago, and that was actually my first project in the group. So with Andorra, the idea was how tourism can be, impacting into nature, mobility, etc. So it was very interesting to start working with them and try to figure out what sets of data could help us to understand the challenges and the impacts in socioeconomic and environmental KPIs. So that was the beginning. It was fantastic because we start kind of small. We had a Secretary of State, we have the energy company, the telecom, and the university. But then the project grew up. And probably you are thinking, why Andorra? Actually, Andorra helped us to set the standards because it was like, what do we need in order to build a collaboration? And the first thing is that you need to have, let's say, a very kind of flexible way of dealing with legislation, because if you want to build a living lab, the first thing that you need to do is being able to deploy technology, to test ideas, and that's the first thing. So because they are a small country, but they are very agile, we had the complexity of a country, but in almost the scale of a city, and they were very agile in terms of changing a little bit the legislation. Actually, now you can fly drones in the city center, and you can test autonomous vehicles because they have changed a little bit the legislation in order to make this kind of testing. The second thing is that the leadership is committed to innovation, okay? So that's very important. We have all the ministers working together, trying to help to foster innovation, and that's kind of unique. Then the other thing that is very important is to have data, access to data. At the beginning, obviously, Andorra was like other country, other city that was having the data in silos, but then they could see the benefits of breaking the silos, starting to correlate that data. That was quite important. They have the technical team. I usually don't explain this, but like in Gipuzkoa as well, you need to have a very good technical team so you can transfer technology and knowledge to them. So kind of they were matching with these needs, and that was why we started with Andorra, even if we had other options. We start with these unlikely partners. So when you want to have innovation, you need to have unlikely partners working together. That's very important. So you need to have in this case, the industry, the academia, the government, and the citizens working together. That's how you have impact. We are in this polarized world where people that they don't like each other, they just don't look into each other. But that's exactly what is killing innovation. So what you need to have is people that they don't like each other working together. And that's also something that we could do in Andorra. It was a lot of people working together. That's how innovation happened. So we started small with the Secretary of State, the energy company, the telecom, and the university, but then we grew that collaboration into an international collaboration with different entities, all the ministers, 151 shops from the Chamber of Commerce of Andorra, everybody kind of working together, sharing data. And then also they have all the innovation of the country clustered in our sister lab. So at that time, the name of the lab was Actuatec, but now it's Andorra Recerca Innovació, and they have clustered all the atomized kind of innovation of the country, put it together in one laboratory, and that's quite important in a small country where you don't have funding for funding many labs. So that was very powerful, and that was the beginning. So we have to keep in mind that Andorra is a country of 70,000 people, but they have 8 million tourists. So that's kind of a big impact for a small country in the middle of nature. They are always concerned about keeping nature, and that's the question. How can we grow but keeping nature? So that was why we started with the tourism. What we realized is that the first thing that we need to know, it was how they move. So through telecom data, we could understand a little bit how they were moving. Mostly the tourists are Spanish and French, even if they have other nationalities. So it was very interesting to see the different dynamics between the Spanish and the French tourists through the data. But then that was not enough. What we started realizing is that telecom data was fantastic to understand the movement, but we need more qualitative information to understand the tourism patterns. So what we started doing, it was looking into social network data like Twitter, Instagram, TripAdvisor, and start extracting that information, that qualitative information from the tourism, and put it inside of our models. So then we could understand how the tourists were moving but what was also the intention and the experience of the tourists in Andorra, which that helped to inform the ministers and understand the impact of the tourists, but also the impact of the investment of the ministers. So the ministers, they invest money on some kind of events, like, I don't know, like mountain bike events or ski events. And for them, it was very interesting and very important to say, is my investment working or not? Who is coming to these events? So through this information and the correlation of this data, we could understand the impact of the investment that the Andorra government was doing, which was very, very good. Then with the energy company, we had a parallel project where Andorra produced more or less 90% of the energy. Now is better, is growing, is producing more energy, but at that time they were producing only 10% of the energy, so they have to buy 90% of the energy from Spain and France. So in order to buy this energy, they need to have prediction tools. That was one of the challenges. Like, you have to pay up front, get the energy, and then maybe you don't use the energy, so you lose money. So they need to have very accurate models. So of course, weather is the most important part, but we were looking into the tourism and what was the impact of tourists. And then we could correlate the different tourists with the behavior of an average Andorran. And we could see how, for instance, maybe French are more or less like the Andorrans, but then you have maybe like German tourism that is more eco-friendly because they go hiking and they go camping. Then you have like maybe British that they are a little bit more demanding because they go, ski and night kind of activities. So you have to spend more energy. And that was very useful also for the energy company, but also for the ministers. And now they can buy energy in a more accurate way, which is also important. So that's more or less the eco-friendly approach. Well, and now Andorra, of course, is just not only because of tourism, but also Andorra is kind of thinking, what is the future of our country? How can we be in sync with nature? So they are trying to become the first country that is part of the UNESCO biosphere. And that's a very interesting project, even if at the end they cannot, who knows, no? Because the entire country becoming a UNESCO biosphere is a challenge because you have to change a lot of things. But just having that ambition and trying to do that is fantastic. And that's where we are helping them, like how through data, through biosensors, how can we help them to be part of the biosphere?